people are constantly raising the bar.
Sacrifices need to be made.
What would you guys say are your biggest weaknesses?
You or your enemy right now?
Is success a lie?
Just a fucking podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Student Side Hustle. This week I'm speaking to Eric Helms. Eric Helms is a research fellow at AUT University. He's also a natural bodybuilder, a natural powerlifter, and a natural lifting coach with 3DMJ, which is where you'll probably know him from. So, Eric, how did this all start? How did you get into this evidence-based bodybuilding, powerlifting, etc.?
Good question. So I started lifting, I think, back in 2004. I was 21. For me, it started as very much a cathartic experience, just trying to work through some stuff that had been going on in my life.
Yeah.
And it started as kind of like an obsession, not necessarily a healthy one.
Yeah.
But very quickly I found that I fell in love with it, and it was a much more positive outlet than other things that like 21-year-old who was going through emotional angst might be doing. So anyway, I tend to have a kind of an all or nothing personality. That's something I've had to moderate and also use to be successful in life.
Yeah.
And so I found that my entire focus became on lifting. So I started studying to become a personal trainer as I had just gotten out of the Air Force, and the career path I was going was going to change. So I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but I knew I loved lifting weights.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in not only the experience of being a weightlifter, but also the culture behind it and the science behind how nutrition and training, quote unquote, works. So that's when I started studying to be a personal trainer. I started my undergrad somewhere around 2006 or 7.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been a steady process from then.
Yeah.
In 2007, I decided I wanted to. Well, actually, 2006, I decided I wanted to compete.
Yeah.
I got exposed to a natural bodybuilding show while I was working as a personal trainer in Georgia before we moved back to California, and I thought it was really cool because I wasn't aware that was really an option or a thing.
Yeah.
I was, the idea of competing as a bodybuilder, I think if you're first exposed to it and you're not naive, you realize that at some point I've got to hop on anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
So getting exposed to drug-tested bodybuilding and seeing that there is a pathway if you don't want to go that route, which I was pretty relieved because I've never even smoked weed. It's just not something that's really in my psyche. Not going that route was preferable, and I think it was useful for someone who has that all or nothing personality to have constraints. So I can focus on training, nutrition, my mindset, and not have to worry about doing something that would potentially harm my health. That is maybe if not an ethical consideration, at least a legal consideration, depending on where you live. And just another variable not to worry about. And for me, there's always been an aspect of I see bodybuilding as something that should enhance one's life. That's kind of the whole message behind 3D Muscle Journey. And I think it's very difficult to make an argument that that's your main goal if you're making the sacrifice of using something that in the kind of dosages you need to take to get to a high level in non-tested bodybuilding would be harmful to your health. So, it's not that it can't be done or that that's not a worthwhile trade-off for some people, but for who I am and kind of who our audience is, that's a line that we draw in the sand.
And it's kind of like that sort of. Do you feel like that would be one of the main reasons that you choose to work with natural individuals and stay natural yourself? Because it's kind of like it's a thing that you can do, and for some people maybe it's a great life choice and that builds their whole career. But do you feel like for you just kind of know it's not what you want to. It's not where you want to dabble. You don't.
It doesn't interest me now that once I got involved in competitive bodybuilding and competitive powerlifting, and I saw that pathway. I was actually more flirting with the idea before I considered competing. Because I didn't have a structured goal. I wasn't thinking about the long term. And I'm really interested. Like when I play video games or when I play board games, cheating is never interesting to me. Not that if you're competing in an untested fed and everyone's on and you're on, that's not cheating. But once I decided to compete in an organization with specific rules, I was like, okay, cool. Let's see how I can maximize it within that context, because that's more fun to me, knowing that you're comparing things within a given structure. I don't know if that's a little OCD of me or something, but I like the structure.
But it's then it's in unnatural bodybuilding or untested, it's kind of you can up the dosages as much as you want, and it's like it's sort of for me it's sort of like, okay, how much are you willing to flirt with risk? And then in natural bodybuilding it's kind of like, okay, you could finish a 50-year long career, you'd still be pretty healthy. Like you'd probably be more healthy than most individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think and it's not that you can't do the untested side in as healthy of a possible way. It's just that there is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And like I've met a ton of guys who never even make it to the pros who are taking ridiculous amounts of gear, and like that was something I thought about too. It's like, well, if I'm training as hard as I can, as effectively as I can, and my nutrition's on point, what else is there left to do? But manipulate that side of it, and I could see that being a very slippery slope. Yeah. So that's the reason why I make the personal choice. As to your question of why we only coach people who are natural, that's a very easy one. Yeah. We're not endocrinologists, and I think because it's relatively common in the fitness industry for people to take anabolic steroids. People think it's you just choose. Like I'm 22, I'm a personal trainer, and I'm going to decide whether I want to work with natural athletes or those who are on gear, and I can give them advice because I have some book on anabolics. It's like I think that's assuming a very low level of knowledge is needed, and you're also forgetting about the legal and ethical considerations there. To really have the knowledge base to inform someone on that, I think requires an intense level of education and experience that's very difficult to obtain. So that's why we don't. Even if I was to decide I wanted to coach people who are on gear, I wouldn't even touch that side of it. Yeah, it would just be I'm doing your training and nutrition. Yeah, and by the way, you're supplementing.
You can get someone else to like work with that side of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I feel like it's kind of like. It's kind of like that decision. Do you feel like it's almost like it was the obvious decision for you? Because it's like, okay, I love natural bodybuilding. I love training and nutrition, getting that as optimized as possible.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I'm what I would describe as a fan of physical culture. So if we look at the big historical impacts of what bodybuilding came from and what strength sport came from, there's always an element of improving yourself as a person. Yeah. Not just looking great on Instagram, not just having a big 3, but being broken. And having completely destroyed body by the time you're 40. But using strength sport, lifting, bodybuilding as a vehicle for personal growth. Yeah. So if you're using all this as a vehicle for personal growth, but you're sacrificing your health, I think you've got your wires a little bit crossed, in my opinion. Yeah. Now, if that's your personal choice, like you don't care about personal growth, you just want to push bodybuilding and powerlifting. You just want to like maximize that light bulb of your life. Exactly. Like, let the others go dim. If that's your thing, go for it. But that's not really what brought 3DMJ together is being on the same page with that basic principle. Yeah. And I think it's the great thing that I think you guys have sort of done is like almost unite a community, because if you follow 3DMJ on Instagram, then you'll see all these other natural bodybuilders that promote similar messages. Like that's how I found AJ, that's how I found Josh Bridgman, etc. Like a lot of them like. And it's like you wouldn't even understand. Like when I first started getting into lifting, like you'd find people like we gave of certain sponsored athletes or whatever. Like you cannot tell if they're like if they always say, oh, the moment they say that they work harder than everyone else, then you kind of like But it's like I think it blurs the view of, say you're an 18-year-old dude, you just want to get jacked, and you want to get jacked as fast as possible, and I think it's almost I think the steroids that they use, like say if you use them in marketing to basically say, I just work harder, blah, 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 my training technique's the best. And I think that can be very misleading to the 18-year-old kid or whatever, just trying to get jacked. And then I think he'll go spend money on your program or whatever. And it's like, that's what I think is the great thing about 3DMJ. You guys kind of like, I haven't ever seen you guys be like, no, this is the one thing you must do. It's always like, a very rational approach and like a very like, hey, this helps for some people, but might not work for you. Like it depends. Like and it's like that's one thing I really, really admire about you guys is, and it's almost like you guys you don't lean towards chasing the like, oh yes, quick, get this money. Like it's like I've never seen like I interviewed one of your clients the other day. I think he's one of Albert's clients, or like Albert mainly works with him, and basically all I heard was like even off not recording, basically all I heard was positive words, and all I've ever heard was positive words, because it's like you guys promote a
a safe way where you can actually live your life and do it? Do you think like how do you go about promoting bodybuilding and living your life to the fullest, right? So it's like, say for someone like myself, I believe that if I do certain lifts like deadlift, squats, and I try to go heavy on them, I just don't think it works for my body. I just don't think it'll ever work. So I've sort of basically given up on those and said, cool, I can go heavy as fuck on bench, on seal rows, on all these things, and just work those muscles in other ways, but I have to take that into account. So how do you think you go about being a bodybuilder, being a powerlifter, but living your life doing it in a healthy way that helps you have longevity as well as do it to the fullest?
I think the big question is you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. You know, often people make fear-based decisions or impatient decisions about wanting to get there now.
Yeah.
Like whether you decide to be natural or not, if you want everything yesterday and you're not actually thinking about the long term, that's probably a fear-based decision. It's probably something that is not actually in line with your goals, or you haven't actually thought deeply enough about what are my goals. Like I'll often ask young lifters who I work with when they're being impatient or they want to change programs or they've lost perspective. It's like, do you plan on not being lifting? Like, are you going to be lifting when you're 20?
Yeah.
And they go, well, of course. I'm like, how about when you're 25?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Like, okay, how about when you're 45? Well, yeah, if I'm healthy. I'm like, okay, so why are we worrying about like the next 4 weeks so much? What's going to happen if you make 1% less gains in your bicep by next month? And then once you can kind of eliminate that or wake them up to that, then they can be a little more rational with you.
Yeah.
And they understand, oh, you're trying to isolate variables so I can see why we're progressing. Or maybe you think that the amount of volume I'm doing might actually get me to progress faster, but I'm going to actually get elbow tendonitis and have to take a month off doing curls completely. Or I'm not considering that my form is barely passable, and we shouldn't be piling more volume on top of a shitty foundation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the real question is you got to look inward and ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing, what is your motivation? And that's something we try to talk a lot about at 3DMJ. We want to build people's critical thinking up, and we want to build their self-awareness up. So those are two really important things. If you have critical thinking skills, then you won't get wrapped up into some of these get jacked quick gimmicks. You won't be susceptible to bullshit supplements or programs or marketing strategies. And then having the self-awareness, it helps you decide, even when you do see through the BS, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is this decision in line with my own personal ethics, my own personal goals in life? And does it actually match up with why I tell myself I'm doing what I'm doing? And if it doesn't, then you can go another direction. So that's kind of where we come from.
Is that sort of like that? You should sort of think about, okay, why am I doing X, Y, and Z? And then think, okay, do I still want... How does that match up with what I want to do? Like it's like same with steroids. It's like, okay, cool. If you do them, that has to match up with your why, and that has to sort of match up with all that sort of thing. Could we touch on a very specific question? Where do you think you would draw the line between evidence-based practice and experience-based practice? And do you think, like, obviously experience is necessary, but do you think how much weight would you put on evidence, like journal articles, etc., or like supplements that have great like reviews or whatever, or like great journal articles behind them and great research behind them? And how would you draw the line between when you want to put more weight on experience or more weight on what you felt has worked instead of what has been scientifically proven to work?
I think it's a mistake to draw a line between the two. And it's a misunderstanding of what evidence is to think it is something verse or separate from experience. And I think this is a really common thing you see in the dichotomy that's grown out of the fitness industry in the last 10 years, where there's the people who promote science and those who promote anything else, which has been labeled by sciencey people as bro science. I think that's actually an unhelpful false characterization. Evidence-based practice is basically three pillars. The personal preferences of the client, this is from the perspective of a trainer, the experience that you have as a trainer, and then the other equally large third pillar is the science. And the reason why those three pieces are equally important is because they each have limitations.
Yeah.
So there is no journal article that's out there that's going to tell you how you should lift weights. You can get an idea of the dose-response relationship for volume, intensity, frequency.
Yeah.
You can take a look at muscle activation studies on various exercises.
Yeah.
You can look at the effect of cardiovascular training on resistance training, so you can get an idea of how much you can do before there's an interference effect.
Yeah.
You can look at macronutrient and calorie intakes that are appropriate for good rates of fat loss that will prevent excessive loss of muscle, etc.
Yeah.
But it's not going to tell you, and on Monday you need to do this, right?
Yeah.
And it also won't tell you, and if you stall while doing that, here's what you do.
Yeah.
And it also won't tell you, hey, there's 10 different options, they're all equally effective, which one should you choose? So at the limits of science is when you have to rely on personal preferences and personal experiences. To give you an example of what that looks like, when you set up an initial protocol for a bodybuilder or a powerlifter,
Yep.
that might be largely based on the evidence. So
Yeah.
for example, most recent meta-analyses, if you were to compile them into big picture variables
Yeah.
for training, you'd probably go, right, we need to train each muscle group at least twice per week.
Yep.
We want to get, probably 10 to 20 sets per muscle group, and we want to be training somewhere in the 6+ rep range for each one of those sets to be on equal footing.
Yeah.
And we want to have some plan for progression over time. After that, you have an incredibly large sandbox to play in.
Yeah.
So, like you said, squats and deadlifts don't agree with your biomechanics. They lead you towards injury.
Yeah.
If you're a bodybuilder, well, that's absolutely fine. Why don't we do a safety bar squat,
Yeah.
or a hack squat, or a leg press, and then an RDL and a good morning?
Yeah.
That's something that you won't get from science. You have to get that from an understanding of principles, talking to the individual about what's worked for them previously and what causes injury.
Yeah.
And then your personal experiences with other clients who've had the same problem or the same issue, or you've used potential solutions to know what your options are. So I think they all marry up quite nicely.
Yeah.
And that's what true evidence-based practice is. It has to include experience.
So it's not just like it's not this black and white, like, okay, the bro science is like, it's in reality it is, in their experience they have found X, Y, and Z work.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some of it is bro science, but a lot of it, do you think, carries over and is like, it's just relevant? It just like you cannot look at a journal study and it will tell you, okay, do push pull legs, or
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z. Maybe it'll lead you towards it, but won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually never thought that's a very interesting way to think about it, because I think it's like like I even lean towards drawing a line between it, right? I've never thought like, okay, because I'm not a coach, so like
Sure.
I would never think about this on a daily basis, but that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just important to understand the limitations of both science and
Yeah.
anecdotes.
Yeah.
So if you essentially take all of the things that somebody says online that worked for them or worked for their clients, and they're wholly unaware of science, a couple things. That didn't cause a regression of performance,
Yeah.
and it at least worked for their population of athletes or themselves.
Yeah.
That's useful information. The limitations are that ideally we want to know what's like best, better, good, okay,
Yeah.
and bad.
Yeah.
All we know is that it's not. It's better than average, right? It will result in some level of progression. That's the only thing we know. It might be the worst option that still results in progress.
Yeah.
We also need to think about the limitations of a given population doing it. So, for example, if 3DMJ was to rely only on our anecdotes, we would know that it would apply to people who are attracted to 3DMJ, right? So as you gain more popularity online, you start to self-select. So we're producing all this content on our YouTube channel and in our blog articles and on our Instagram about training, nutrition, and diet, right?
Yeah.
So that means the people who follow us are going to resonate with that.
Yeah.
So they're already going to be biased towards thinking that works, having tried it on their own and seeing some success with it. So when they come to work with us, it's going to reinforce the beliefs we already have about our anecdotes.
Yeah.
And that's true of every coaching business that has any kind of social media following, is that you kind of become even more siloed in what you do.
Do you feel like it becomes an echo chamber? Like
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the way to guard against that is to make sure that you're still aware of what other people are doing in the industry. You're staying up to date with the science.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to have all those equal pillars. You can't purely rely on anecdotes, or you might be using the the worst methods possible that still get some progress.
Yeah.
And you don't want to rely completely on science, or you just simply won't have answers when you run into pitfalls and you need individual adjustments.
Yeah.
And you will not you won't be paying attention to all the things you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
You know? From a coach's perspective, when I get an email from someone and they've sent me their video response for the week and their Excel spreadsheet, I'm not going to send them back, hey, increase your volume to 10 sets per week because Schoenfeld et al. 2017. It's going to be a much more involved conversation.
Yeah,
that's
where anecdotes come into play.
Exactly, and if I'm paying attention, then I can see more often than not which one of those anecdotal changes was effective.
Yeah,
and I can look back on now my 13 years of coaching and go, right, this tends to work most often in these situations.
Yeah, so it's sort of like that maybe evidence-based can like give you, it can be like, okay, well, we know this is better than this in this situation, but then it's like you can apply that using, and then you can see, okay, in X situation, X worked really well, whatever, and that's, wow. So, what about when it comes to like things that you think are almost like, okay, if you're looking to become a bodybuilder and maximize muscle mass, minimize fat, is there any things that you think are like plain, like from your point of view, you think that they are still disputed in some different circles, but from your point of view, the research you've done, the anecdotes that you've observed, the anecdotes and observations, is there any certain things that you think basically you believe to be true, but it's other people still think it's debated?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a few things, and this is cool because this is where debate occurs between well-informed experts.
Yeah.
It's kind of at the limits of science.
Yeah.
For example, people love to put me and Mike Israetel on the same podcast because we share many of the same core beliefs and principles.
Yeah.
But some of our methods that are at the limits of what the science says and delve more into the practical application side of it that have to be based a little more on experience and just your logical take on things can differ.
Yeah.
So I not that I have an example of a difference between Mike Israetel and I, but that's just one good example of evidence-based professionals who don't necessarily agree on everything.
Yeah.
Although we probably agree on more than we disagree.
Yeah.
So some areas that I have perceived through anecdotes that seem to work really well, that we don't have a huge, good, solid evidence basis for, would be nonlinear dieting. I've seen.
What is that?
So great question. So that's basically a structured manner of coming out of a calorie deficit and going to maintenance or into a surplus before then coming back.
Is another term for it reverse dieting?
No, reverse dieting is the process by which you're slowly adding calories back in after a diet's over.
Right.
So a non-linear diet might be that you're on a deficit for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then for a week you're eating at maintenance, and then you go back.
Right.
And the claim would be that doing so helps you maintain more muscle mass, prevents some of the slowing of energy expenditure so that you can diet on higher calories, and might mitigate some of the hormonal adaptations that you might see at the end of a diet, so that if you were to take person A and person B, and at the very end of their diet, person B, who followed a nonlinear approach with, say, refeeds and diet breaks, might be on higher calories, might have a little more muscle mass, but it's at a similar body composition in terms of body fat percentage. But it's maybe healthier, happier, saner, more muscular, and less beat up from the diet.
Yeah, and sort of, do you think that would play a huge part in longevity in doing things like that?
I think it's almost required from a mental standpoint if you want to be a competitor in natural bodybuilding for the long term. And if you have to get to, especially if you're competing in the bodybuilding division, which requires you to get so lean to be competitive. Just for a little bit of insight, when I was competing, I did my first season in 2007, my second in 2009, and then in 2011 is when I did my last season, and I'm probably going to get back on stage in 2019. The caliber of conditioning has improved greatly. So in 2007, 9, and 11, at each amateur show in, let's say, the men's bodybuilding division, there was maybe 1 to 2 guys who came in with stride and glutes who were fully in great shape. I go to shows now, and the top 5 in each division may be that lean.
Yeah.
It used to be that if you had decent structure, average genetics in terms of how much muscle you could build, and you got shredded, it was just a matter of time before you got your pro card.
Do you think that is due to the fitness industry just completely expanding, or do you think it's due to like people like you guys basically owning people up to bodybuilding and telling them how to do it, like sort of instructing them properly, and like people having coaches?
I would have said in like say 2013, I would say a large part of it is just there being more people involved. But since then, it's the popularity of bodybuilding has either stagnated or slightly dropped off.
Yeah.
So like,
wait, really?
I would say so. So in 2013 was kind of like the peak where you go to a natural bodybuilding show and
there's
most
like
of the
27 competitors.
Were stacked.
Yeah.
I'd say it's still close to that, but not quite there.
Yeah.
A lot of it's moved into men's physique and bikini.
Right.
But these people are still competing.
Yeah.
Powerlifting, I'd say, has gotten larger than natural bodybuilding by a long shot.
Yeah.
USAPL Nationals typically has 1,000 competitors each year, which is insane. Even here in New Zealand, the first year in 2013 when I did Auckland Champs, there was me and two other guys in the open 93 kg division.
Yeah.
And then the last time I did it in 2015, there was 10 of us.
Yeah.
And I'd say that more than tripling is representative across all weight classes. So there's that many more powerlifters in the world.
Yeah.
Part of that is inheriting lifters from CrossFit. So we have to always tip our hats to CrossFit driving lifting engagement, I would say, overall.
Yeah.
And part of that is just the actual popularity of lifters and the social media giving the interconnectivity.
Yeah.
But bodybuilding, I would say there was a jump in engagement, which means you're going to have more genetic outliers, more people who have a natural talent, and they're thus for a higher caliber of competition. But I would like to say, and hopefully I'm not overestimating the influence of evidence-based practitioners.
Yeah.
I think that there's a higher percentage of people who are coming to the stage prepared.
Yeah.
And if I had to nail it down to like one variable, if I said like if I could talk to anyone who is struggling to get in shape for a bodybuilding show, I said you probably need to diet longer. Like 9 out of 10 times, that is the typical issue as to why someone couldn't get lean enough. And the standard prep length, I would say these days, is 6 months. It used to be 3.
Right.
So
you think
that's playing a big role.
What would you say? Where would you say for 3DMJ or for your guys' sort of practice? Where would you say is the boundary of too long, too short for a prep?
Good question. It totally depends on the individual.
Yeah.
So going back to kind of circling back to why I think nonlinear dieting is so important.
Yeah.
Even though there's not a huge amount of evidence behind it, is that okay? Look, if the average prep length is somewhere between 5 to 7 months.
Yeah.
How are you going to last 5 to 7 months?
Yeah.
Especially if that's let's say best case scenario, it's 5 months until your first show.
Yeah.
You compete shredded, and then that either qualifies you for nationals or it gets you a pro card, and then you decide to compete in a pro show 3 months later. Now you've got 8 months before you're actually going to be moving into a surplus.
Yeah.
So making sure that you can maintain your muscle mass, sanity, and have some reasonable food intake and non-unreasonable level of cardio means that we need to kind of pull out all the stops.
Yeah.
So that's where I think refeeds come into play, diet breaks come into play. The compromise when you do nonlinear dieting is that you're spending less total time in a deficit,
Right.
which means that not the diet length, but the prep length increases.
Right.
So some people might go, oh my God, you diet people for 6 months, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But they might not realize that when it's all said and done, if you look at refeeds and diet breaks,
Yeah.
they're only dieting for, say,
Like their time in a
deficit might only be 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's relatively similar, but the time that they're actually having to spend dieting or in a prep is a lot more. They can maintain their sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it comes at a cost. Like, I'm not naive to the fact that even on a diet break, like let's say you've been dieting 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then I go, right, we're going to take this entire week at maintenance.
Yeah.
But to be at maintenance, I want you to at least track calories and protein.
Yeah.
And drop your cardio off. You've still got to send a report to me every week.
Yeah.
Record your MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
And actually, weigh and track your foods because
Yeah.
I want the same level of precision or close to it.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to be in a
Like
deficit.
eating 16 donuts.
And I don't want you eating 16 donuts, exactly, right? So it's not a complete break from the process, but it is at least a physiological break and at least a step down in mental stress.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off there, Some people would rather just go all in, put the foot to the floor and just go in. But I do think that results in typically worse outcomes as far as the final package on stage.
Yeah, and I think like, say if you use the example of AJ Morris, right? He very much has the mindset of I will do everything I can do to get myself on stage.
Yep.
But I believe he still does things like refeeds, right? So it's like it's sort of like a balance. Like he's one of the most hardcore people I know, and like he will do pretty much anything he can, and that doesn't exclude him from doing refeeds. Like,
No, absolutely. I think sometimes the most hardcore thing you can do is doing what's actually hard.
Yeah.
And you know, bodybuilders grinding themselves in the dust isn't hard. That's often the default setting.
that's what they want to do.
Absolutely. It's, you know, when in doubt, just work harder. And that's why we get hurt. That's why we get burned out.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, someone applies to us and this gal is currently doing 5 days of cardio and using 1,600 calories in the off season.
Yeah.
You know, so it's more of, okay, not playing into that and taking 2 days in maintenance and taking a week off dieting and stopping doing cardio when you feel pressure to get shredded yesterday.
Yeah.
That's hard, you know, and shifting your perspective and your mindset to where you can think about 6 months from now versus the next 6 hours is actually what's hard for most bodybuilders.
Yeah. Do you think it's similar to how, you know how Bert's doing a 5 year bulk or something?
Till the year 3000, I believe.
Yeah. Like I think people like AJ as well. It's like I'm really a big fan of the whole movement of like, hey, try not to cut. Like if you need to, cool, but like I'm sure mini cuts have a place and all that. But like I think he literally titled one of his videos "The War on Mini Cuts" or something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and like, what's your opinion on that? And like, do you think it's a similar sort of thing? Because and even like on rest days, because for myself, right, like I love lifting, and like most lifters can like feel that they love just getting in there, lifting some weight, going as hard as they can, getting onto pre-workouts and heavy metal, like they just love that. But it's like for myself, I struggle to have the rest days because it's like I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And it would be great if I didn't need them, but obviously I need them. And like I think even more for myself, I think I need them more than most, just because it's like everything gets banged up if I
don't.
Yeah, like everything just gets messed up. So do you think like that whole mindset is a very like safe and positive thing, and also leads towards longevity?
Yeah, I do. I think the fastest way to get burnt out on bodybuilding is trying to always stay shredded or trying to constantly be in a deficit. And then that's not actually bodybuilding. You know, that's more of like the aesthetics revolution. You know, like if you do this stuff and you can walk around at 8% body fat all the time, I can't tell you how many, like probably 3 digits of people I've consulted with one-off on Skypes where they've multiple times failed to get to 8% body fat because they've males who think this is it, like that's the leanest I can be, look great and maintain it because someone said that on Instagram. And they want to be like their insert fitness idol name, and they diet down to that level or close to it, and then they come off the diet and they gain right back to where they were over and over and over again. And they're just looking for, maybe they think, well, Eric Helms is magic. He can do this in a way that allows me to maintain it. And the reality is they're just trying to maintain too damn lean, and they're not going to be happy even when they get there because they haven't built any muscle because they've been spending the last 2 years trying to get there. So this wasn't a problem in like the early 2000s, 90s, mid 2000s even, where the bodybuilding culture, at least among men, was get freaking huge, probably overly fat, unnecessarily large, and then diet, and then repeat that process. That has its own issues, but I would say the issues are a lot worse with the whole constantly be lean, be Instagram ready all the time culture.
Because it's like do you think it perpetuates like a negative mindset about it? And like
absolutely, I think we're starting to see among males some of the things that women have struggled with for a long time. So there's been, in my perception as someone who's not female, so this is not a perfect description, I think there's been a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way. And whether you're 10% body fat or 20% body fat as a male, and before the social media boom, it was kind of like whatever, like that was okay. Like if you look at the body fat compositions that Hollywood stars can have if they're male versus female, there's a lot more diversity among men, you know? But I think that's changing, unfortunately. Like, I think men, because of the quote-unquote aesthetics revolution, Instagram, YouTube, and the constant exposure to the some would say the ideal male physique.
Right.
I think it's creating a similar culture.
Yeah, negative. Would you want to say like negative body image sort of stuff?
I think it very much can be.
Yeah.
I also don't think it should be looked at totally black and white.
Yeah.
Like I've seen people literally shame bodybuilders and powerlifters who are lean and muscular just for taking pictures of themselves because
Right.
they're saying, hey, you're promoting an unrealistic
Yeah.
image.
Yeah.
And
it's not like that's not why they're doing it.
no, for example, for me as a bodybuilder, if I was to post pictures of myself,
Yeah.
my physique, that is very much the same in my mind to a basketball player, let's say one of the NZ Breakers,
Yeah.
showing him shooting free throws.
Exactly, yeah.
in
And I think
practice.
that's what people like. Say I've had debates about people in my class about this. Like they're like, "Oh, why do you care so much about how your physique looks?" It's not. I feel like for me, it started out of insecurity, right? And
Yeah.
maybe there is still a point of body dysmorphia or all that, but I'd say for most bodybuilders or most people who love lifting, I'd say hopefully I hope that it comes from a place of more. It's like a sculpture. It's basically like a sculpture.
Yeah.
Or like it's like I want to do the best. I want to look the best I can, not because I'm insecure about it. It's because I want to create the best possible work of art that I can.
Yep.
And like it's not an easy thing to do. And it's like I feel like if you can just get your noob gains, and if that's, I think that is enough for most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it completely. Like, when I gained like I used to weigh 52 kilos, right? And I gained up to like 62. And then I was like, holy shit, I'm so jacked. Like, I thought I was huge. I thought I was a god. And then it's like, and now I'm at the point where I've gained like 8-9 more kilos, and I'm just like, cool. It doesn't change my perception that much.
Right.
It's more just like, okay, that was way harder. But it was like, it's more like, wow, it's such a challenge now.
Yeah,
And
I think, again, it goes back to like we were talking about before, finding your why. Like if you think that getting abs year round is going to change your life, then you need to reevaluate your goals.
Yeah.
Like I've my wife, who I've been with for now 13 years, married for 12.
Yeah.
If I stopped lifting, we would still have a relationship.
Yeah.
And so long as I still took care of my health to some degree and I didn't get like unhealthily obese or something like that, it would be a non-issue. And the same goes for her with me. And I think if you're trying to replace something missing in your life, whether that's self-worth, personality, the development of your intellectual side or whatever with outward appearance changes, then that's a problem. But if you're someone who is challenging yourself in multiple facets of your life, and one of them is, hey, I want to see if I can build the most muscular piece of art as my own body, or I want to compete among other people who do that, I think that is a wholly different motivation. It's easy to get caught up in some of the negative side of it, but so long as you stay self-aware and you know your why, you can have a barrier to getting sucked into that. But that's not everybody. I think probably the majority of people who follow someone who has an amazing physique and is has 1 million Instagram followers might have some negative associations with their body, or don't know their why, or their why is probably something that's damaging to their psyche. So I think it's an important conversation to have and pointing that out, but I also think we can't make blanket statements about everybody.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of people like you and I who do it for different reasons.
Yeah.
Potentially healthy reasons even, I would say.
Yeah. And I think there's even like, especially even for myself sometimes, there's always the moments where you look at someone, you're like, wow, why don't I have 3D delts, right? And then you're like, but it's not like but then again, maybe it is. I don't know, it's always a very complicated thing to try and analyze your own like self-insecurities, etc. But it's like, I think a great example of someone who's like done it and is challenging themselves in multiple facets. They're very like aesthetics, etc. Z's, all that. But it's Mo Samuels. I've had him on before. He's challenging himself in many different facets of life. And when I talk to him about like, have you ever had any like feelings of body dysmorphia or insecurity, it's never. He was never like, this is I really just want to be big as fuck. Like it makes me feel so small. I feel small every time I look in the mirror. No, it's like, I think I'm fucking sexy as hell. It's like he thinks he loves it, right? And it's never like, even when he went on a holiday, got decently fat, and like he was just like cool. Like he was still just like whatever. Like it's not like this like, oh my god, don't look at me, let me put on a big shirt. It's like Yeah, and I feel like if I compare my feelings before I started lifting, I would hide in baggy shirts, I'd hide in baggy jumpers, and now I feel like lifting has like liberated me from that sort of mindset, not like put me deeper into it.
Absolutely, and I think it can feed the positive or the negative, depending on what's going into it and the motivation behind it. And I think I get this question a lot, and this is a semi-tangent, but I think it relates. Some people ask me like, hey, you mentioned that sometimes your clients come to you with disordered eating or eating disorders. Do you think it's ethical to work with them? And for one, I always have them, if they're willing, to concurrently work with an eating disorder specialist.
Yeah.
But I also remind people that, hey, competing in bodybuilding may be a step in the right direction. Before, they might have just had an eating disorder and not even been lifting weights.
Yeah.
And now they actually have some kind of outlet.
Yeah.
It may not. They might not have the most healthy approach to the sport.
Yeah.
But it's not like the sport is the problem.
Yeah.
The sport is potentially them trying to quote unquote self-medicate.
Yeah.
Giving them some kind of, well, at least bodybuilding has a period where you're in a calorie surplus. You're trying to gain weight. It restricts the time spent dieting, and it makes sure that your dieting is healthy enough to maintain lean body mass. If you're doing it right.
And it sort of teaches you the principles, like the girls who want to just lose as much, they want to be as small as possible.
Yeah.
And they just do as much cardio as possible, and then there's girls who do that, and then they start lifting, they start figuring out like calorie surplus, and then obviously I'm not a girl and I haven't been through this, so I wouldn't know. But
Sure.
it's I feel like I can imagine them sort of thinking like, wow, a calorie surplus, holy shit, I gained muscle, like cool, my glutes are growing, all that sort of stuff. And it's like I feel like it can completely change someone's perspective of how you can actually change it.
Yep.
And not feel so trapped.
Yeah, absolutely. Done right and being exposed to the right information sources.
Yeah.
It can be a wholly positive experience. Done wrong, we've heard all the horror stories.
Yeah.
It can make your life a lot worse. So I guess it goes full circle back to I think it's a mistake to brand that these are either black and white, that the quote unquote aesthetics revolution has to be negative or has to be positive.
Yeah.
I think you just need to have a really strong self-awareness as to why you're doing it and to question your own motives, which is, like you said, no easy thing, but it's critical if you want to stay sane in this industry.
You need to sort of figure that out. Do you think there's ever a point where people have to think, okay, is me participating in bodybuilding unhealthy, or is me, if it's a mental thing, or if we completely exclude steroids from the conversation, if it's just a mental thing, or if it's like it becomes a detriment to their life, sort of thing. Do you think there's ever a point where you've recognized certain people consistently sort of have a bad mindset about it, or do it to a point where it does become a detriment?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many clients I've talked out of competitive bodybuilding.
Yeah.
I've had clients who the only way they know how to prevent weight gain is through a contest prep.
Yeah.
So their off season is a slow slide towards a body they're increasingly unhappy with.
Yeah.
Contest prep is their only tool they know how to manage that.
Yeah.
Even highly successful ones, so you wouldn't expect this.
Yeah.
They don't have any maintenance skills.
Yeah. What do you mean, staying at maintenance calories?
Like they don't know how to just eat, and maintain their rough body composition.
They just have no
train.
Yeah.
They know how to bulk. They know how to cut.
Yeah.
And they start to feel more and more trapped in the sport.
Right.
They feel like they have to do it season to season.
Yeah. They don't know how to stay in a maintenance.
Absolutely.
Right.
Both mentally and in terms of practice. A lot of people who their self-worth is dictated by the outcomes in competitions. So their athletic identity is so strong that they see themselves as a physique competitor rather than someone who is pursuing a physique sport in this chapter of their life. And they can be absolutely wrecked by a poor season. So I think in those cases, there's a strong case for taking time away from the stage because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And just focusing on the part that originally brought you to it.
Yeah.
There's an interesting piece of research that's kind of fucked up if you think about it. So researchers went into a preschool and they identified the kids who were drawing.
Yeah.
Okay. These are just 3-year-old, 4-year-old kids that are drawing. They like to draw.
Yeah.
They took half of them, and they started rewarding them for drawing. Like, hey, that was a great drawing, Johnny. Here's some candy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other group, they just continued to observe. That was their control group.
Right.
And then they just stopped the study at some point. So they went away. And they found that a greater number of the kids who had been rewarded for drawing stopped drawing once the reward went away.
Yeah.
Now, these are kids who didn't start drawing to get a reward.
Yeah.
Which is very much
They're
like...
already drawing.
Exactly. Which is very much like how lifters get into bodybuilding.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I've been lifting weights. I love it. Wouldn't it be cool to compete in this? And then all of a sudden, their initial intrinsic motivation becomes more and more extrinsic and focused on winning a world title, getting my pro card, placing in the top 3, et cetera, et cetera. And then once that starts to go poorly, which it inevitably will, even unless you're just the absolute goat as far as like bodybuilding, like you're going to lose at least a few times.
Yeah.
You can actually take away from your baseline foundation of enjoyment.
Yeah.
So it's really important to try to be aware of that and maintain your enjoyment of the process.
Yeah.
You know, there's kind of like this stepwise ladder that I use to help my athletes stay motivated.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I'll get a bodybuilder who comes to me who is all encompassed and focused on winning pro card, world title, first place, a given show, etc. And then I go, right, remember, this is an individual sport. This isn't boxing. There's no defense.
Yeah.
All you can do is better yourself and then see how the chips fall. So I try to move them from trying to beat other people towards just improving themselves.
Yeah.
And that is a huge step in the right direction. It makes people a lot happier. Because now if they improved but they got a poor shake from the judges because it's a subjective sport, that no longer wrecks their life.
Yeah.
So I've returned some agency to them. I've given them some more power in their own journey.
Yeah.
But that's still, that's basically a ticking clock. Because you can only be improving your body into like your 40s, 50s, you know, like.
And then once, like, do you feel like it's like when you get to a point where it's like, okay, I can't do anything else?
Yeah, exactly. So that's you're almost a ticking time bomb. Like either you're going to get injured or you're going to get old.
Yeah.
And that happens to everyone. There's going to be some reason you're no longer as good as you once were.
Yeah.
So once I've gotten to the point where they're focused on improving themselves rather than beating others, then it's time to start focusing on enjoying lifting for lifting's sake.
Right. Yeah.
It's
do you find even if people get into the habit, or they're not the habit, they start to like all their lifts start to fall down, or they start to see physique deficits or whatever?
Yeah, that's tough. You know, you can definitely go through ruts. It's a long time away though, especially if bodybuilding is your goal. Like, let's say you can no longer squat. You know, like I've had athletes who have done like blood flow restricted, leg extension, leg curl, and hip thrust as their entire leg training, and you wouldn't know it. Yeah. Because if you find a way to load tissue, you can maintain it during a diet or grow in the off season, right? But yeah, once you start to get to that point where you're like 50, 60, 70, it gets pretty hard to make physique improvements, or at least just even hold the line. Yeah. So by that point, or by the time, you know, if you do have one of these catastrophic injuries, you need to have a stronger why. Yeah. Like if you get one of these big injuries and you're all encompassed and focused on beating your previous self, it's not the injury that's going to do you in. It's the depression that sets in when you've lost your basically your identity. And I've had a few injuries myself. I'm not old by any means, but I'm mid-30s, so I'm aware of looking at the big picture. Yeah. And I think it's really, really important to fall back in love with lifting as a competitive lifter. Yeah. Because it's something you don't necessarily lose it, but you lose the focus on it. Right. I used to just love lifting for lifting. Yeah. And progress was a part of that, but it wasn't everything. You know, the culture, the changes I saw in my body, the feeling of doing it, trying new exercises, getting sore, all the things that make our culture what it is. I think you have to reinvigorate that passion so that you can have a more robust happiness to get to when curveballs get thrown your way in life. Yeah, definitely. I think that mindset is so important for me, especially myself, just because I have imbalances. I don't think I'll ever be like. I think I can be a great bodybuilder as myself, but I don't think I can ever be like number one. Like it's just like I can't see it as a feasible possibility, just because there's so many imbalances, there's so many issues. I have like I'm genetically built to be a distance runner, but I don't enjoy it. So it's like like my legs are like 8 meters long, so it's like it's literally like I've kind of accepted the fact like cool, but then like I can still get to a physique where I'm like, holy shit, is that me? Like, my God. And it's like, I think that's such a great thing. And it's like, I'm probably hoping to compete at some point, but it's also like,
if I do, it's not going to be. If I don't place, cool, because it's like it could be basically the judges say your right pec is too small, your left lat is non-existent, you have no left erector, and then it's like that's something that I can change to a point, but like. Say with my left erector, I don't even know how I can work it. Like, I don't think there's any way I can work it without the right one just taking. It's like a log. Like, it's like, and I think that mindset is so healthy because it's like, without that mindset, it's crazy how to think how many mental issues can actually be a problem in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Do you think it's like getting to actually talk to people and coach people? Does that sort of give you perspective?
Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest issues bodybuilders have are in relation to their perspective with the sport and their relationship with the sport, and how to make it into a sustainable lifelong career. So that's probably the biggest thing and biggest piece of enjoyment we get out of what we do at 3DMJ is helping bodybuilders find a healthy relationship with their passion by far. Yeah.
And that's sort of like you get to be able to guide them in a way that does it in a healthy way, and they can still play with their kids. They can still go eat ice cream sometimes. They can go like do these things, and it doesn't have to be this disruptive aspect. It doesn't have to be a detriment.
Absolutely, we're trying to help foster a career in bodybuilding versus let's maximize this one season and then burn you out and you're never going to do it again. Yeah,
and it's sort of fostering the love and passion for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll probably finish off with one more question because we're about 10 o'clock. What would be your main advice for someone looking to become a coach or become a personal trainer, and they know they want to stay natural, they know they want to steer clear of the steroid or the drug side of it? What would be your main advice for someone looking to do that and do it for as long as possible, as happy as possible, while also probably competing themselves, powerlifting, bodybuilding, etc., but also coaching people? And what would be your main advice for that person?
I think the big one is be patient. Recognize that to get the kind of, if we go back to the three pillars of evidence-based practice, each one of them takes time, to develop the emotional intelligence to where you can really get at what the personal preferences of a client are and communicate to them that it's okay to tell me that. You don't just have to follow me like a soldier. And then to understand that information and know how to apply it takes time of developing relationship skills. To get a solid understanding and a continuing understanding of the research takes time. You may or may not decide you want to do a degree or even a postgraduate degree in exercise science and nutrition. I don't think that's necessary, but it's certainly a useful vehicle to it. You could certainly subscribe to a few research reviews, spend a lot of time researching online, and the internet's a beautiful place. You have access to all information. And then as far as the experience side, there's just simply no way to fast track experience. The closest thing you can do is offer to coach your friends and family for free, and to get the skill of coaching done, and then also using yourself as an experimental model first. If you go through the process of getting on stage, going through off seasons, doing mini cuts, trying different approaches that are all make sense for training and nutrition, that builds your initial set of experiences that you can rely on to at least know, even if it may not work the same way as someone else, you at least know what it's like to try to do three squat sessions a week or something like that. It's basically take a multifaceted approach towards building that expertise. So you need to develop emotional intelligence and communication skills above all else. You need to get a fair amount of just time spent coaching underneath your belt, and then you need to set up some system, whether that's a formal degree or subscription to research reviews, etc., to stay current and understand the basic principles of the science behind it all. And if you do those three things, then you're doing everything you can do. And then it's just a matter of being patient and realizing that it might take 5+ years before you're actually good at what you do. So,
and then sort of keeping that in mind. Could you also list a few resources, educators, or people that you think everyone should follow? If they want to listen to people like you, if they want to hear people similar to you, who are some people that you'd recommend? Obviously 3DMJ, etc.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think there's some great stuff out there. Like on YouTube, if you are a big fan of watching things visually, I would say Omar Isuf and Jeff Nippard are great channels to follow. If you're a big fan of podcasts, I would check out the Strength Athlete podcast, especially if that's basically all powerlifting all day. And if you want some more scientifically based podcasts, I would check out Sigma Nutrition Radio, hosted by Danny Lennon. That's a really good one. On the more general like science stuff that you can follow like on Facebook or Instagram, I would say Alan Aragon, James Krieger, Brett Contreras, and Brad Schoenfeld and Mike Israetel are all really good. Those are people I would definitely suggest for people if they want to follow them. So between all of that, that's a fair amount. I think you get a pretty broad perspective and a lot of good information.
Very, very balanced perspective as well. And then where can people find you online, 3DMJ, etc.? Absolutely. So probably our hub is 3dmusclejourney.com. That links out to our YouTube. That links to the 3DMJ Vault, where we have all of our free and paid courses for those who want to become students of the sport, either bodybuilding or powerlifting. You can also find our blog articles there, our podcast. If you want to follow me personally on Instagram, that's at Helms3DMJ. And then if you want to go through and actually become a personal trainer who's specifically educated in training bodybuilders and powerlifters, check out the SBS Academy. I teach a unit in that on coaching bodybuilders, and Dr. Mike Zerdos teaches a unit on coaching powerlifters. That's more apropos to your question of how to become a coach. I think that's a good resource as well.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Student Side Hustle. I would appreciate so much if you would leave a review if you'd like to hear more of what I'm saying. Then I would love if you would follow me on Instagram or check out my other social media, all linked in the show notes. And again, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful evening and study hard.